The gate had barely finished opening when the first gunshot echoed from somewhere deep inside the estate. Smoke curled from an upstairs window. Guards in black suits sprinted, shouting in Japanese, and somewhere in the chaos, a man was walking calmly toward the front doors like none of it concerned him at all. If you love stories where an ordinary person stumbles into a world they were never meant to see, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications because this story only gets more intense from here. 3 months earlier, Ariana stepped off a plane into a country that swallowed her whole. She spoke almost no Japanese. She didn't know a single soul in Tokyo. She had left everything behind for a fresh start, and now she was starting from absolute zero. She applied everywhere. Restaurants, hotels, convenience stores, rejection after rejection. Her savings shrank week by week, and the fear of having to go home empty-handed grew heavier every night. Then, almost like fate, she saw the listing. A private housekeeping position, live-in accommodations, pay far above anything she'd seen advertised anywhere else in the city. This has to be a mistake, she whispered to herself, rereading the number twice. But desperation doesn't ask questions when opportunity knocks. She applied that same night. The interview was strange from the start. No family present. No introductions. Just a stern, composed woman named Hannah who asked pointed questions about discretion, loyalty, and whether Ariana was the type of person who minded her own business. I just need work, Ariana said honestly. I won't cause any trouble. Hannah studied her for a long moment, then nodded. You start tomorrow. The mansion took Ariana's breath away. Marble floors that gleamed like glass. Chandeliers dripping with crystal. Gardens so perfectly manicured they looked painted. It was the kind of house she'd only ever seen in magazines, the kind of house that didn't feel real. But something about it unsettled her from the very first hour. The hallways were long and cold, and every footstep echoed like it didn't belong there. Room after room sat locked, untouched, waiting for something or someone that never came. There were no photographs on the walls, no warmth, no sound of family laughter drifting from any corner of the house. It was beautiful, and it was hollow. She barely saw the man who owned it. Daichi left before the sun rose and returned long after midnight, always dressed in the same sharp black suit, always silent, always distant. Ariana told herself it wasn't her place to wonder why a man who lived alone needed a house this large. But then she noticed something that made her blood run cold. One night, passing his study, she caught a glimpse of his cuffs as he shrugged off his jacket. They were stained with blood. She said nothing. She told herself she'd imagined it. But the image stayed burned into her mind for days. Something is very wrong in this house, and Ariana is about to find out exactly how wrong. If you're feeling the tension already, drop a comment below telling me what you think Daichi really does for a living. I want to see your guesses before the truth comes out. Hannah pulled Ariana aside on her second week, her expression unusually serious. There are rules in this house, she said. Rules you do not break. Ever. She listed them one by one. Never enter the basement. Never wander into the West Wing. Never touch the wine cellar door. Never, under any circumstance, use the old elevator at the end of the East Corridor. No matter what you hear, Hannah added, voice dropping low, you do not investigate. Do you understand? Ariana nodded, though every instinct in her screamed that this was not a normal request in a normal home. That night, she understood why. She woke to the sound of screaming. Not one voice. Several. Distant, muffled, but unmistakably real, rising up through the floorboards like the house itself was groaning in pain. She sat upright in bed, drenched in cold sweat, staring at her door as if it might swing open on its own. She didn't sleep again that night. For days afterward, Ariana tried to convince herself she dreamed it. She buried herself in work, scrubbing floors that were already spotless, dusting shelves that never collected dust, anything to keep her mind from wandering back to that sound. But curiosity is a quiet, patient thing. It doesn't shout. It waits. And 2 weeks later, while cleaning the library, curiosity finally won. Ariana was reaching for a book on the highest shelf when her elbow caught the edge of an old wooden panel. It shifted. Then, with a groan of hidden hinges, an entire section of the bookshelf slid open, revealing something that shouldn't have existed. An elevator. Hidden. Waiting. Her hands trembled. Every rule Hannah had given her screamed in her mind. Turn around. Walk away. Forget you ever saw this. But her feet carried her forward anyway. She's about to break every rule in the house. Stay with me, because what she finds behind that door is nothing like what you're expecting. And if this story has you hooked already, smash that like button. It genuinely helps this video reach more people who need a good binge-worthy story tonight. The elevator door slid shut behind her with a hiss, and for a moment, Ariana was swallowed in darkness. Then the floor lurched downward, far longer than any normal basement should take. When the doors finally opened, Ariana's breath caught in her throat. This was not a basement. It was a fortress. Wide concrete corridors stretched in every direction, lit by rows of fluorescent lights. Armed men in tactical gear moved briskly past monitors, displaying dozens of security feeds. Somewhere down one hallway, she caught a glimpse of a firing range. Down another, rows of server racks humming quietly. There were medical bays, training grounds, offices furnished more luxuriously than most penthouses. An entire hidden world buried beneath an ordinary house. Ariana's mind reeled, trying and failing to make sense of what she was seeing. Weapons lockers, communication hubs, men who moved like soldiers, all of them answering to a single, unspoken authority. This wasn't a home. It was a headquarters, and she had just walked straight into the middle of it. Before she could even process the thought, a siren blared overhead. Red lights flashed against the concrete walls. Somewhere, an alarm system had detected her, an unregistered presence in a place that was never meant to be found. Within seconds, footsteps thundered from every direction. Armed men surrounded her, weapons raised, shouting commands in rapid Japanese. Ariana raised her trembling hands. "Please," she whispered, though she knew none of them could understand her. "I didn't mean to." The words died in her throat. She was certain, in that moment, that she was about to die in a hidden bunker beneath a mansion no one even knew existed. Then the crowd parted, and Daichi walked in. The tension in the room shifted instantly. Every armed man lowered his weapon and bowed his head. The silence that followed was heavier than the gunfire she'd expected. Daichi's eyes locked onto hers. Cold, calculating, unreadable. "Leave us," he said quietly. The room emptied in seconds, leaving Ariana alone with a man she now understood held more power and more danger than she'd ever imagined. This is the moment everything changes. If you don't want to miss what happens next, make sure you're subscribed because the story is about to take a turn nobody sees coming. Daichi circled her slowly, studying her the way a predator studies something it hasn't decided whether to kill or spare. "What exactly did you see?" he asked, his voice low and controlled. Ariana's mind screamed at her to lie, to beg, to say she'd seen nothing at all. But something about the way he watched her told her lying would be far more dangerous than the truth. So she told him everything. The guards, the weapons, the medical bay, the offices, all of it, word for word, without a single omission. Daichi listened in silence, his expression unreadable, waiting, she realized later, for the fear to break her voice, for her to fall apart the way anyone else might have. Instead, when she finished, she asked him something that stopped him cold. "Are all these people here," she said quietly, "because they have nowhere else to go?" Daichi didn't answer right away. In fact, he didn't answer for a long time, because in all his years running this organization, surrounded by soldiers, enforcers, and men who feared him, no one had ever asked him that question. Not once. Something shifted in his eyes. Not softness exactly, but recognition. As if for the first time in years, someone had looked past the guns and the blood and asked about the people underneath it all. He didn't kill her that night. He didn't even punish her. He simply told her to return to her quarters and speak of this to no one. A warning delivered so quietly it felt more like a request than a threat. Ariana barely slept, replaying his eyes, his silence, his restraint. Whatever this man was, he wasn't what she'd expected, And whatever this place was, it clearly held secrets far bigger than a single hidden elevator. But peace, as it turned out, was the one thing this house could never keep for long. Word of the intrusion had already reached ears it was never supposed to reach. Ryota, the leader of a rival syndicate that had spent years trying to tear Daichi's organization apart, learned within hours that someone unauthorized had entered the underground headquarters. To him, this meant only one thing: betrayal, a breach, a weakness to exploit. He didn't wait for confirmation. He didn't wait for details. He launched his attack that very night. The mansion, once so eerily silent, exploded into chaos. Gunfire tore through the gardens. Windows shattered under the force of an explosion that rocked the east wing. Smoke poured from the upper floors as armed men flooded through the gates, cutting down security in their path. Ariana was thrown from her bed by the force of the blast, ears ringing, heart pounding so violently she thought it might tear through her chest. She stumbled into the hallway just as Daichi came sprinting toward her, blood already on his sleeve. This time, clearly not from anyone else. "Get to the shelter," he ordered. "Now." But Ariana didn't move. Not because she was frozen, because she refused. "There are people hurt out there," she said, voice shaking but firm. "I'm not leaving them. If you're on the edge of your seat right now, you are not alone. Type, 'I'm hooked' in the comments if this story has you completely glued to the screen, because it's about to get even more intense." What followed was chaos unlike anything Ariana had ever witnessed. She ran through smoke-filled corridors, dragging wounded guards to safety with strength she didn't know she had. She used the basic first aid knowledge she'd learned years ago, pressing cloth against bullet wounds, keeping men conscious with nothing but her voice and her hands. She didn't ask who was loyal and who was an enemy. She didn't discriminate between the men in expensive suits and the ones holding rifles. She simply helped. Daichi caught glimpses of her throughout the battle, pulling a wounded soldier from a collapsed doorway, refusing to abandon anyone despite the very real danger to her own life. He had seen loyalty bought with money. He had seen fear disguised as devotion. He had never, in his entire life, seen someone act this way for people who owed her nothing. But the night wasn't finished delivering its cruelty. In the confusion of the battle, Ryota's men found her. Before Daichi could reach her, before anyone could stop it, Ariana was seized, dragged through the smoke, and thrown into the back of a vehicle that sped off into the night. Ryota believed he had found something far more valuable than information. He believed he had found Daichi's weakness. He was going to be wrong. Bound and terrified in an abandoned building somewhere across the city, Ariana faced Ryota's interrogation with nothing but her own trembling resolve. "Access codes," Ryota demanded, circling her the way Daichi once had, though there was no restraint in his eyes, only impatience. "Security protocols. Tell me what you know." "I don't know anything," Ariana said, voice cracking but honest. "I'm just a maid." Ryota didn't believe her. Men like him rarely believed simple truths. But somewhere across the city, Daichi was done being patient. He gathered his men. He prepared for war. Not the calculated, distant war of business rivals, but the raw, personal war of a man who was about to burn down anything standing between him and getting her back. This is where everything comes to a head. Before we continue, if you've made it this far, comment your favorite moments so far. I read every single one, and it means more than you know. The rescue mission that followed was nothing short of chaos. Explosions lit up the abandoned district as Daichi's men breached Ryota's stronghold. Gunfire echoed through concrete corridors. Smoke-filled hallways lined with debris. In the middle of the fighting, in a rare moment of stillness before the chaos escalated, Daichi finally told Ariana the truth he had kept buried for years. The truth behind the basement, the guards, the secrecy that had haunted every corner of that mansion. The underground headquarters, he explained, hadn't been built by him. It had been built by his father decades earlier, not to expand crime, not to hoard power, but to fight something far darker. Trafficking rings, corrupt officials protected by law, criminal networks the justice system could never touch. His father had built a place to dismantle what the law couldn't reach, and to shelter the very people the world had already thrown away. Not saints, not heroes, but not the monsters she once feared, either. Everything Ariana believed about that house, about Daichi, about the silence and secrecy she'd once found so terrifying, shifted in an instant. But there was no time to sit with the revelation. The final battle was only just beginning. Ryota launched everything he had left at the underground headquarters, sending mercenaries pouring through the tunnels in a last, desperate assault. Gunfights erupted through narrow corridors. Explosions tore sections of the bunker apart, sending dust and debris crashing down around them. Daichi met Ryota face to face at last, and what followed was brutal, close-quarters combat. Years of rivalry, betrayal, and violence finally colliding in one final, desperate confrontation. Meanwhile, Ariana didn't cower in a corner waiting for rescue. She moved to the surveillance room, hands shaking but focused, using everything she'd learned in her short time in that world to guide Daichi's men through hidden passages. She locked blast doors to trap advancing enemies. She rerouted security feeds to expose ambush points before they could be sprung. She saved dozens of lives that night, not with a weapon, but with quick thinking and a courage she never knew she had. Together, through blood, fire, and sheer will, Daichi and Ariana brought Ryota's assault to its end. We're almost at the finish line. If this story has kept you hooked from the very first scene, hit subscribe now so you never miss the next one, because the ending is going to hit even harder than the fight itself. Months passed after that night, and the mansion that had once echoed with silence and secrecy was almost unrecognizable. Children's laughter drifted through the gardens where there had once been nothing but cold, manicured emptiness. The underground headquarters, once filled with weapons and war rooms, had slowly transformed into something entirely different. A rehabilitation and protection center for survivors who had nowhere else in the world to turn. Ariana no longer wore a housekeeping uniform. She had become the director of the very foundation that now gave shelter to people just like the ones she'd once feared were prisoners in that basement. And Daichi, cold, guarded, unreadable Daichi, had slowly, carefully begun to let someone into the walls he'd spent his whole life building. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the gardens, he led her back down to the basement one final time. Only this time, there were no guns, no soldiers, no shadows of violence lingering in the corners. Where weapons lockers once stood, there were now classrooms filled with children's artwork. Where interrogation rooms had once existed, there were counseling spaces designed to help people heal instead of hurt. Daichi looked around the transformed space, then turned to her, and for the first time since she'd met him, he smiled, genuinely, fully, without a trace of the guarded distance that had defined him for so long. The first person who found this place, he said quietly, changed it forever. Ariana smiled back at him, her heart fuller than she ever thought possible after everything they'd survived together. And maybe, she said softly, it was never the basement that needed saving. That evening, beneath the restored gardens of a mansion that once hid nothing but darkness and silence, Daichi knelt before her and asked her to stay by his side forever. The place that once concealed secrets, violence, and pain had become something entirely different. A symbol of hope, healing, and a future the two of them had built together, out of the ashes of everything that almost destroyed them. If this story moved you even half as much as it moved me writing it, let me know in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe for more stories just like this one.